Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund Grants Informational Webinar. We're excited that you're interested in learning about the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund. And let us start by introducing ourselves so you know who's on the phone. This is Renee Barrios, Senior Vice President here at the Greater Houston Community Foundation, and my colleague.
This is Lamicia Butler, and I serve as the Harvey Fund Grants Director.
So first we want to start by just saying thank you for all of the important work that you're doing in our community right now to help us recover from the disaster. And of course, we acknowledge that you do important work every day, even when it's not disaster time. But now more than ever, we know how busy and how stretched many of you are, and we just want to appreciate and say thank you for everything you've been doing. Just a couple notes about the call. We are recording it. The webinar, so it will be available later, and of course all the lines are muted. We're happy to answer your questions. We have a very extensive time for Q&A, so please submit the questions and we will answer them all either during the call or afterwards if we need to take them offline. So let me share a little bit of the agenda and just what we're going to cover. So we just did welcome and introductions, and we are going to give an overview of the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund, a little bit of information and update about the Round 1 grants process, and then we'll share information about Round 2, which is what is going live tomorrow, go through some frequently asked questions that we've already been hearing from many of you, and then deal with the questions, respond to the questions through Q&A that you have been posing online, and some final remarks. So we should take about 45 minutes or so, just depending on how many questions you all have. Starting with the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund overview. I know it's been in the news a lot, so it's top of mind, and you may feel as though you know everything about it. But we thought just a little bit of a reminder of the fund was important. This fund was set up, before the storm even hit by our Mayor Sylvester Turner and Harris County Judge Ed Emmett. And it's focused on the immediate and long-term relief efforts and needs in Harris County and the city of Houston. And the Greater Houston Community Foundation is managing this fund. We are very honored to have been selected for this role and see it as a great service to our community. More than 100,000 individuals and companies have given to the fund so far. The total raised at the last report that I had was about $83 million. And it's amazing to see gifts, large and small, from all across the United States, as well as here in Houston, of people who are wanting to make a difference. The mayor and the county judge appointed chairs for the advisory board of the fund. Tony Chase is the chair from the city of Houston side, local CEO, and Bill Jackson, the Harris County budgets director, is the co-chair from the county side, and they have 10 members of the board. Also, through a grants charter, an additional grants committee has been appointed, and this is many program officers and other leading philanthropic professionals who are on loan from other foundations, helping to ensure that this is a really outstanding grants process, and we appreciate their service. And so they are engaged in the development of the application and reviewing all the applications and making grant recommendations to the advisory board for their consideration. So that's an overview of the structure of the fund, and just a little bit more detail about it. The fund is really focused on the unmet needs of individuals and families in the city of Houston and Harris County, including city of Houston residents who live in Fort Bend or Montgomery counties but are still city of Houston residents. And the purpose is very broad. It is meant to help ensure that the unmet needs of people recovering from the disaster are met. So everything from basic needs, food, shelter, transportation, healthcare, child care facilities, and other needs that the advisory committee identifies. So it's a broad mandate to help the community, and all the funding, of course, is going directly to 501c3 nonprofit organizations. None of it is going directly to individuals. You may also be interested in knowing that the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund leaders are in coordination with other relief funds, and so there has been an effort underway to be in very active collaboration with the United Way Relief Fund, with the Rebuild Texas Fund, with the J.J. Watt Fund, with the Qatar Fund, so that everyone is sharing their grants information, their processes, any needs assessments that are being done, so that we can make sure that these philanthropic dollars are as well spent as possible. And we're also very committed to transparency as part of all of those processes. So at this time, a needs assessment is being conducted, and we're actively working with the Kinder Institute for Urban Research and others to ensure that all needs assessments that are happening across our community, that all of that data can be shared so that the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund has the best information possible to inform its grant making, but also we will be sharing all of that with the public. So a little bit about the first round of grants. If you follow GHCF and you follow the news, you know that the first round of grants was made October 2nd. This was a very expedited timeline that was meant to begin to address some of the immediate needs. And so it was an invitation-only process for that reason. 28 organizations were awarded grants to provide emergency relief. And that focused on basic needs, temporary housing, rapid rehousing, really getting people out of shelters, emergency financial assistance, and emergency case management. If you're interested in seeing who all received funding in that first round of grants, that is all available on our website. We certainly realize there are many other organizations doing very important and substantial work in our community, and so we're very happy that the process going forward for round 2 is a completely open process where any 501c3 can apply as long as they meet the eligibility criteria. So I'm going to turn it over to Lamicia to talk about round 2, which is what I know you're all excited to hear about.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you to everyone who has joined us today. We're really appreciative of not only you being interested in this process, but for all the work you do prior to Hurricane Harvey and everything you're doing to help the individuals who've been affected. Today we will share more information, and we'll start with just the eligibility criteria for round 2. Specifically, to be eligible for a Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund grant, an organization must certify that they're meeting the following criteria, and I will share that all of this information will be inside the application, and you will need to certify that you meet this eligibility criteria in order to apply. So the first is that you must be a public charity described in Section 501c3, or a governmental unit within small cities within Harris County. For the purposes of this round, private foundations and private operating foundations are not eligible for funding. We also require that you provide programs and services for individuals and or families living in the City of Houston or Harris County, as well as City of Houston residents living in Montgomery and Fort Bend County. So again, the same for the purposes of the reason the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund grant was created. We're also requiring that individuals who receive funding in terms of your organizations, that you begin providing services to those who are impacted within 30 days or less of receiving funding. Our emphasis on this is very important, as we really want to make sure that the dollars go out and you're able to serve and help those who've been impacted quickly in a very short timeline. And finally, you must also use the funding to serve additional individuals, specifically new clients that your organization has not served prior to receiving the funding, as well as you can expand your existing services for current clients that have been impacted by the disaster event. So we really want to see your grant dollars to be able to serve those additional clients that you haven't reached. A few more eligibility criteria that we have for you today. We do have reporting requirements, which will require that an interim report be filed within 45 days outlining the progress on your grant outcomes, as well as the usage of your disaster relief funds. And then we would also ask for a final report on the usage of your funds that happens within the 120-day spending requirement. So just want to pause here and let you know, again, we have an accelerated timeline not only to process and have a grant application process, but also for those funds to get out through the doors so that you can help and reach individuals who've been impacted. So we do require that you spend your funds within 120 days after you've been awarded the fund. We also, in the spirit of making sure that everyone has the ability to be served, we ask the organizations who are applying to agree to a non-discrimination practice. And so you will be able to certify that you will not engage in discriminatory practices from those who seek services from your organization. And then finally, we would ask that you submit financial statements so that you can prove that you are in good financial statement, your organization is able to accommodate the dollars and the funds that we would share with you if you were awarded a grant. New to this round, we are also asking individuals who receive funding and to help us with our goal to be transparent about the grant process. If your organization were to receive a grant, we'd ask that you consent to disclose information from your application. This would include a number of sources, including 211 and other entities that may distribute information to the public about who has received grants and where individuals can receive services. We'd also allow you or ask for your permission to disclose your information to the general public or the media if they have any interest in what you have shared you would provide as a result of receiving funding. And then finally, as we look to share and allow people to understand where the grant dollars have gone, we would ask that you also contribute in helping us spread the message by posting and sharing the information that you have received funding from the Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund by putting it on anything from your client applications for intake to also your marketing materials that may include anything from your donors list, website, social media, etc. I want to walk through a few of the grant focus areas. We have 6 focus areas this time, and we would ask that organizations who are applying, you provide disaster recovery assistance in one or more of the following areas. So just so you know a little bit more context, these focus areas were determined after identifying what the current needs were for individuals impacted by Harvey, and so that has informed the funding sources and the focus areas that we want to provide. So the first we'll start off with is disaster case management, and here I just really want to emphasize that this is not your day-to-day case management that you may provide for your clients. We're specifically talking about how you're helping individuals recover from the disaster event and any of the ways that you see listed on the slide. So everything from helping them to develop a recovery plan, screening from duplication of benefits, and then also providing access to resources for their unmet needs. So truly case management that is focused on helping individuals recover from the disaster event. We also have temporary housing and home restoration, which could include repair, emergency financial assistance for persons impacted by the disaster event, services and assistance to vulnerable populations. And I want to pause here because in the determination for this focus areas, we actually identified several demographic groups as being most vulnerable during the recovery process. And so we're looking for organizations that will target their disaster relief recovery to individuals who belong to one or more of these populations. So you see them listed here on the slide: the elderly, individuals with disabilities, non-FEMA qualified individuals, LGBTQ, and also undocumented individuals, all of those who have been impacted by the disaster event. We also have behavioral health services, and that includes children's mental health. Again, specifically as you relate your services to those who've been impacted by the disaster event. And then finally, legal services that enable impacted individuals to access needed resources, such as efforts to clear their homeowner title. I'm going to walk you through some of the guidelines and some overview so you understand the process. The grant amounts will vary for each organization, and they'll be determined by a case-by-case basis. The grants committee will review each application and proposal separately and make the decisions accordingly. Once again, I want to emphasize the need for your applicants and your organizations that you must start your project within 30 days or less of the announcement, and your funds must be spent within 120 days of receipt. And then finally, for joint proposals, if you are partnering with another organization to submit a grant, we would ask that you only submit one application, and you can have one organization serve as the lead applicant. So we do have questions inside of the application where you can detail who are the partners involved in the project that's being proposed for funding, and then you can answer additional information about how you plan to distribute the funding amongst the partners. As part of your application, you will be required to upload some documents. Some of these are very similar to what you've seen prior if you've done any previous grant applications. So we will ask for your current list of board of directors, an overall operational budget for your organization. We'll also ask for the project or program budget for the amount requested in the proposal. We'd like to see how you plan to distribute those funds and how you will use them if granted. And your most recent Form 990, as well as audited financial statements. And again, we want to make sure that your organization is in good financial standing. So if you do not have audited financial statements, we'd ask that you include other statements that indicate your financial position. And we have some detailed information inside the application that allows you to understand which statements you should upload to prove that. And then we do have three optional documents that you would be able to upload. These will all be regarding or based on the questions that you answer in the application. So we have asked if your organization has done previous disaster relief efforts, and if so, we will ask you to tell us a little bit about that. But then if your organization has actually conducted an evaluation in the past, we'd love to hear more about that and see any of the program results that you have in the past. Secondly, we'd also ask if you have received funding for your Hurricane Harvey relief efforts from other sources, that you share that information with us and detail the purpose of the funding as well as the amount that you have received. And then finally, as we look to just be more informed and have data drive our decisions, we'd love to know if you have done the same thing. And so if you have a needs assessment that your organization has conducted about individuals who've been impacted by Hurricane Harvey, we'd ask that you upload that. One quick note about that, because these documents are optional, you will notice in your application if you do not have those documents, it will say that that status of that document being uploaded is incomplete. However, you will still be able to upload your application. You will still be able to complete and submit your application. Just simply look for the indicator that you've met all of the prerequisites of the application. Finally, the question that I'm sure everyone's interested about, which is when can you get started on your application? And that answer is 9 a.m. tomorrow. The application will open on the website www.ghcfgrants.org. Once again, that's www.ghcfgrants.org. You must include the www to get to the correct site. You use your email address and create a password if you haven't already set up an account for the Grant Administration portal. And you can select Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund grant application when you log in and are ready to start your application. If you have any questions or you encounter any difficulties, you can email us at grants@ghcf.org. And just a note, if you've already previously applied through the GHCF grant system for Touchdown Houston or any other grant, we ask that you use the same login. Again, if you don't remember your login, feel free to email us at grants@ghcf.org and we will help you recover your account. So now we are going to move into frequently asked questions. So we will have, Renee and I are going to
ping pong. So I'll start and let me see if I can do some as well, just to give her a little break. So a lot of people are probably wondering in terms of the grant size, how much money will be distributed in round two. The advisory board has decided that at this point they anticipate granting between $10 and $15 million in round two. They are wanting to wait to make larger and larger grants until after some of the needs assessments are finalized, which will just take a little bit more time, and also to understand all the funding flows from government programs which are still being developed. So that really goes to the next question about a maximum amount you should consider for the funding request. There is not a limit that we are putting on it, but we would encourage you to consider that round 2 is funding, at the $10 to $15 million level total, so that we would encourage you to keep that in mind. Does the organization have to be physically located in the city of Houston or Harris County? That is not a requirement, although there is certainly an interest in supporting local organizations by the advisory board. But the crucial piece is that the organizations are serving individuals impacted by Harvey who are City of Houston residents and or reside within Harris County. We will not be able to conduct site visits at this time due to the nature of the expediency that needs to happen with the accelerated grant timeline. In terms of when decisions will be made, the grants committee is working very hard, as is the advisory board. This will be subject to the volume of grants, but the anticipated timeline is that round 2 grantees would be notified by November 10th.
As far as who you can contact, if you have any clarifying questions regarding your application, you can email us at grants@ghcf.org. That's the best place to email us so that we can respond and get you a timely response about your application. If you've received funding for Hurricane Harvey relief efforts from another funder, yes, you would still be able to receive funds. Again, we would just ask that you upload a list of your funding support as well as the purpose and the amounts that you've received for your funding. If you've received funding in round 1, you are still and you meet the eligibility requirements, you would still be able to apply in round 2. And then also, if you don't receive a grant in round 2, could you apply in future rounds? The answer is yes, as long as you meet the eligibility requirement for future rounds. And I will just note that we have not determined what that eligibility requirement or what those focus areas would be for round 3 or anything beyond, but we would just ask that you review and see if your organization meets eligibility.
So we will continue to communicate as the advisory board develops future grant-making plans. All of those will be communicated through our website, through social media, so certainly we will be transparent about those rounds as they develop.
In terms of accessing the application, once again, that website is www.ghcfgrants.org. That is the one place that you can go and not only view the application, but that is the only place that you can submit the application. So no paper applications will be accepted, only online. And donor Houston profiles, we thank you for those of you who do have those. It's not required to apply for a Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund grant. And if your profile is outdated or still in progress, that's okay. You simply need to go through the website to apply. Finally, if you have trouble with your application, again, that email address is grants@ghcf.org. That's the best place to email us if you're having any trouble. So we want to thank those of you who have applied for or submitted some questions in. We're moving quickly through the presentation so we can get to them. We will, again, just take turns on answering some of these questions. And then we'll start off with the first one in terms of if a nonprofit has not yet received their 501c3 status, but they have a fiduciary agent that is a 501c3, can they still apply?
That is a question we'll have to discuss with the advisory board. It has not come up as an issue yet, so we would not be able to answer that at this time. We will refer that to the advisory board and be able to respond to later. There is certainly a preference towards organizations that do have experience in disaster relief and who have a financial track record. So we would have to see. I'm not sure that we can answer that yet at this time.
And I should have said this before we start off with the FAQs. We will provide these slides as well as the audio after the call. So those of you who are asking about that, we shared that at the beginning, but yes, the slides and the audio will be available after the call. We have another question about specifically whether or not the funds, and I guess I'm thinking about the housing component that we've mentioned, if those funds can be used to build permanent housing for Harvey displaced low-income families in this round.
My sense would be that the advisory board is not ready to focus on full reconstruction of housing yet, partly because everyone is still waiting to see where the Texas General Land Office funds that are going to be focused on rebuilding are going to come out, because at least as of last time we checked, those guidelines have not been developed. So we can take that conversation offline a bit, but the advisory board's guidance at this point was more focused around home repair rather than full rebuilding. It is certainly possible that once we have a full needs assessment and there's more clarity about where the government funds are going towards that, that may be addressed in a future round. And it is certainly every need that we hear about from nonprofits is something that we do communicate back to our advisory board, but full home reconstruction was not meant to be a focus of this round.
Thank you. And I'll take this question and I'll allow you to add anything that you want to, but there was a question about whether or not, because the organization has already provided resources for Harvey Relief, if they could apply for a grant and then use it as a reimbursement. And the answer to that is no. We would like you to use any funds that you would receive from Hurricane Harvey Relief Fund to provide additional services moving forward. We have a question about whether or not independent school districts are eligible because they do not have a 501c3 status, and that answer is no.
At this point, ISDs would not be available. There are some funds that have been given that were designated specifically for educational purposes, and there will be a group of the advisory board who will be looking at how to allocate and grant those funds, and so that may be coming for future consideration. But at this point, if it was an ISD, we have had ISD foundations apply, and most of our school districts do have foundations, and that is a route to which they could apply through that. But beyond that, once we are able to look at the educational needs and the specific gifts that have been given for education, that may be addressed in a future time.
So we have a couple of questions about services to vulnerable populations, and specifically what those services could include, as well as whether or not children or low-income individuals fall in that vulnerable population.
Yes, we defined vulnerable populations with some specificity because these were areas of need that we were continually hearing about. But we are certainly open if one has data to suggest other segments of vulnerable populations that you would like to be serving. Obviously, we know that children can be vulnerable and low-income individuals in general. So I think, we set out a number of vulnerable populations that, based on data and feedback from the nonprofit community, need to be served. But if you are serving others, we are open to hearing about that. And certainly the major focus is funding services really for unmet needs for people who've been impacted by the disaster. So if you are serving people, we would encourage you to go ahead and apply and detail why the services you're providing are important for the recovery of those who you have seen as vulnerable. And most organizations we know are likely serving multiple groups, so they may be serving some in the vulnerable population list that we set out, and there may be some others that you're identifying as vulnerable, and we're certainly open to that proposal.
Thank you. And once again, just want to reiterate, for those individuals who seek several concerns because you are smaller organizations and you don't have audited financial statements. Again, we do require financial statements, but they don't have to be audited if your organization has not conducted an audit. So that details of what statements would be accepted is in the application, so you can get it there. And then we have a question about organizations being churches that are 501c3s, but they have not filed a 990. Is there a supplement that they can submit instead of the Form 990?
Yes, we would be open to seeing other documentation that you would have if you are a church who has not filed a 990. We would like to see, obviously, other documents regarding your financial statements, your governance, your boards, your spending, all of the things that we would normally see from a 990. In another form, we would be open to seeing that. And, there will be the opportunity for churches to apply, and every nonprofit that applies will have to follow the same consent in terms of non-discrimination and service to all. And, of course, it should also be noted that services must be aimed at disaster recovery. There cannot be church services focused at spreading faith of any kind, be it Christian, Jewish, Muslim, Hindu, anything. So the services by the faith-based organization, church, synagogue, or mosque would have to be disaster recovery services rather than faith education or something of that matter, and that is asked about in the application. But we're very open to those proposals.
Great. And we have a point of clarification. Someone asked whether or not the fund was going to be used specifically just for individuals, or is it only for organizations, meaning 501c3 organizations?
The question was whether or not we're funding individuals directly. Yes, the fund does not provide any direct assistance to individuals. The fund is set up very clearly to support 501c3 nonprofit organizations who are the ones who have the capacity to directly serve individuals. The Community Foundation and this fund does not have any capacity to do case management or serve individuals directly. We believe that the best way to do that is through the nonprofits, and that is what they do every day, is help our individuals in our community, and that is the mandate of the fund. It is to help nonprofit organizations who are helping our community recover.
Another great question that's come in is they're noting that their organization has seen a lot of middle-class individuals who are struggling to recover, and whether or not there's a limit on income in terms of who an organization can help.
We have not set specific income limits on who an organization can help. We do realize people from all walks of life were impacted by the storm, and particularly for middle-class families, that these impacts can easily really hurt the financial security that a family may have built up. So we're open to receiving proposals. We would just want there to be data backing up why there is still need for that family, and we want to be able to serve everyone who needs to recover while also making sure that we focus on those who are most vulnerable. So we certainly encourage an organization to apply and let us know. We do ask if they are providing financial assistance that we know what the screens are for that. So while we have not set any kind of specific income limits, we do want to make sure that every organization providing assistance has obviously a data-driven system and process for determining who has that need and accounting for how it's spent.
Great. We have a question, and I'm going to summarize it, and then you can weigh in on this. But I think the overall question is that they have their general day-to-day programming that they provide funding to low-income students for college. They are certainly doing some of that and increasing as a result of Harvey, but would that be eligible?
I think that what the judgment here is the service that you're providing directly related to the storm. So if you can draw that correlation and causation that students are needing more financial assistance because of the impact of the storm, then we certainly would be open to receiving that. If not, then that really would not be a qualified proposal. So if you remember, while we of course believe that people of all types in our community need help, this fund is specifically for helping individuals and families recover from the disaster, and the services that are provided should have a direct correlation to the experience of the disaster and how that's impacting those individuals or families, and the services should be directly related to helping them recover.
Okay. And just once again, just want to reiterate that religious organizations and churches who do not have to file a 990 are eligible to apply. We do have some documentation that we would require instead of the 990, but you would be eligible to apply. We have a question about whether or not can the funds be put towards program staff and salary and benefits.
So to the extent that the staff is directly related to providing the services, that is possible. What the advisory board has not wanted to see is funding just for overall general operating. We of course understand, and we're a nonprofit ourselves, we understand that every organization needs to operate, needs offices, needs technology, et cetera. We believe that what the board is most going to want to see is that everything in your budget directly relates to your capacity to deliver programs. So to the extent that the staff is supervising case managers, or that you need additional laptops because you have new staff, or that there is software that needs to be bought in order to continue your case management. So we're open to those capacity needs as long as they're directly tied to the organization's capacity to deliver effective service in disaster recovery.
Yeah. There's a question about whether or not there's a limit on the amount of funds that can be distributed per family or individual, and I think that as a foundation, we wouldn't set those limits for you. We would just ask you to think about, the amount that you're requesting and how could you best serve more or those individuals. So we would not put a limit, but we would ask you to indicate, what is your target in terms of the number of individuals you're trying to reach, both new and existing clients. There's a question about whether or not nonprofit clinics are eligible to apply based on the grant focus areas, and they're thinking that their clinic is not eligible for it.
There's nothing to exclude any nonprofit organization from applying. This round is not specifically focused on healthcare beyond behavioral healthcare, but we encourage all nonprofits who believe that they're serving unmet needs to apply. And even if it doesn't fit this focus area or is not determined to fit this round, it's useful input for the future grant making. So we certainly would encourage you to apply anyway, and you may be providing both behavioral health and physical health services. And you also can contact us through grants@ghcf.org, and we can take that conversation offline. But we wouldn't, we believe the more information that we receive through the grants process and through the applications, along with obviously all the needs assessment that's happening, will help inform our advisory board about future grant making.
We have a question about whether or not after 120 days if services are still needed, can an organization reapply? And I'm going to take that to the next step. I'm thinking you're meaning if you were awarded a grant, could you reapply for additional funding? So the answer would be if once the criteria and the focus areas for future rounds are identified and your organization is still eligible for application, then yes, you would be able to reapply after those 120 days. The amount that you receive would be for that 120-day period, however. And then we have a question about whether or not education foundations providing funding to the independent school district it supports, would that be possible if they're providing direct services?
Yes, we would consider that.
Okay. And then finally, do we need to provide a statement or copies of records to prove that someone is in need? We would ask that that would be part of your process as an organization to do your due diligence in terms of what individuals have received assistance and how you can help them. Again, trying to remove and eliminate the duplication of funding and assistance that goes to the same individuals. So that would be something that we would ask you to look into and to do your due diligence on your part.
It is an important question, though, and we certainly have been hearing, as I'm sure many of you, that unfortunately there is some fraud going on where people are applying for FEMA using stolen Social Security numbers. And so certainly we are looking at, in the grants application process, as we ask you about your disaster case management, as we ask if you're providing direct financial assistance, we are certainly looking to know how you are screening people, how you are looking at fraud, and just what processes you are using to ensure that you're helping people who most need it.
We have another question about whether or not member organizations that support service providers are eligible to apply.
I'm not exactly sure what that means. I would say you should look at the focus areas and the eligibility requirements and see if you feel that you fall in those. And if you still are confused, we can deal with that question via email.
I'm going to take a moment and scan. As you can see on this site, we want to remind you again how you can access the application and that the application will be available tomorrow at 9 a.m. You will have 1 week to complete the application, and one of the things we thought about, we do know that 1 week is a quick turnaround for you to return your answers, so you will see that your responses will have word limits. We did that so that it's not a burdensome process on you, but it does allow the grants committee to review the information that you're submitting and have enough information to make a wise decision about the ability of your organization to handle and receive a grant.
So we see, just in terms of other questions, there's questions here about applying as part of a collaboration. And we have funded in round one collaborative proposals, and you can apply as part of a collaboration. There's clear instructions in the application about that, but what we ask you to do is there needs to be a lead organization that's the fiscal sponsor, and then you need to detail in the application how much funding is going to the different organizations inside the collaboration and how that is happening. We have had organizations apply as part of a collaborative and also apply individually. And you are certainly welcome to do that, and it will be the grants committee and advisory board decision whether there would be funding in both of those cases. Trying to see if there's any other questions that ought to be answered. There's just 1 minute while we pause. I think we have answered all of your questions. Certainly, if you think of additional questions as you start looking at the application or as you have time to process what you've been learning today, please email us at grants@ghcf.org, and we will respond as promptly as we are able to do so. We hope that you have found this information helpful. We aim to make sure that this grants process is transparent, easy for our nonprofits to complete, while at the same time being thoughtful and hopefully providing us as much information as possible so that the grants committee and the advisory board can make the best decisions to disperse these funds to organizations with the capacity to deliver services to those who most need recovery. Again, we express our appreciation to every nonprofit partner in our community that is heeding the call of service at this very important time, and we certainly appreciate your efforts and look forward to working with you through the application process and making sure that you are able to complete it and access it, and that your questions are responded to promptly so that we can ensure that these grant application process goes as smoothly as possible. So I would just say thank you for participating, and let me see, I don't know if you have any.
Thank you as well.
And tomorrow at 9 a.m., the application will be live. Have a good afternoon.